We'll
true.
probably have to cut the first half of this off. Anyway, hello everybody, and welcome back to ABM Answered. I'm Sam, and today we're going to do something a little different, which is a deep dive into how to use Clay. So I've asked my good friend Panos to come on board and walk us through some workflows. So welcome, Panos. I don't know if you want to give like a bit of background about potential. Well, I'll give a bit of background first. So I met Panos in almost peak COVID. We were in Athens at
Oh
a
shit,
co-work
yeah.
called the Cube, which was an awesome place. And what was the guy that owned the place called actually?
Stavros.
Stavros, yes. He was like the
Yeah.
ultimate tinkerer. There was like gadgets. He was like a secret agent merged with like co-working owner. But like the Cube was awesome. And yeah, actually I'll let you take this, Panos, because you were working on a startup at that point. So maybe it'd be good to go from there, like your entrepreneurial roots to how you ended up becoming a clay expert.
Absolutely, man. And thanks for having me. I think we met about 3 years ago. I was doing Bubbles. It was a consumer app at the time. And I really liked how you tinkered with different products. I think you mentioned like a beer hand at some point, right? Something with a robotic hand that pours beer. Yeah, from that point on, I switched from consumer apps to B2B SaaS. At some point, I joined Sales Captain. It was a leading agency in the UK, lead generation. I was leading growth. Now I left the company. I'm doing my own agency, and I typically work with early stage to Series A startups, and we're building their go-to-market motions.
And it's as simple as that. Well, we say it's as simple as that, but Clay in itself, which is obviously one of the fundamental tools, is very complex to the average user, including me. Like, so I've been in email systems. I was using Apollo in like 2017. I almost hit like, well, I would call it the gold rush of email, because obviously it's not prime early 2000s when everyone was opening them, but prior to 2017, I was building all these lists manually, outsourcing with the support work from people out in Bangladesh, trying to build lists.
Yeah.
And then as soon as my friend Lee introduced me to Apollo, I was like, wow, I can run like 12 campaigns a day. And it was awesome because emails were still getting through. It was harder to get blacklisted. You didn't need like 20 domains to, kind of like
Yeah, good times.
distribute your emails. You could just run it from your actual domain. So you didn't need any subdomains. And I think like that lasted for a good I think early 2020. No, I'd say until 2021, somewhere in mid 2021, when everyone in COVID, I think, cottoned on to how easy it was to blast out emails.
Yeah.
And to be honest, they had no choice, right? We were all kind of like locked away. That ruined things really quick. And what was working before didn't work. And now it seems every year or every 6 months, there's been a change that someone needs to keep up with. And I think ultimately, if we're cutting all the fluff out to be successful, I think the biggest problems right now with email is people don't know how to write emails, and people don't exclude enough people from who they're
Right.
targeting.
Yep.
So like it's almost like you need better targeting and better messaging. I'm not going to name them, but I reviewed one of my friends' company's emails like from their sales reps recently, and it was still very much, "Hi there, I hope you're well," and then like lots of just like me, a lot of fluff and nothing speaking about them. And I think the crux of a good email, and correct me if I'm wrong, you might have your own opinions on this, is it's all about kind of resonating with their problems. And personally for me, and I know this divides a lot of people, I believe in personalization at an account level, hence the account-based marketing. Whereas I do know there are some people out there that, go the extra mile and find out, including my friend Henry did this, found out that one of his target prospects owned a pig farm somewhere in the countryside in London, and it worked for him. But like over the years that I've done this, I've weighed up the amount of time it takes for me to invest like deep down personalization into like Twitter and like all these other channels and you've got to tie it in with the risk as well of it being it can sometimes creep a few people out. And for me, I just feel like it's a much safer bet time wise and like not creeping out the prospect to keep it all about the relevance of at an account level. And
Yeah, no, absolutely.
potentially kind of tie it into their job roles and what they do. But Panos, I don't know if you've got any, they're my two biggest problems with email at the moment. I don't know if you've got different ones or what you're
No,
seeing.
I think this is spot on. Everything starts with targeting first, and basically you don't want to reach to everybody. And I think something that caused this problem, it's because of all the automations and all the data sources that we have available, scalability became easy and people got lazy. And it's like, okay, I'm going to blast this email to everyone and fingers crossed, I'm going to get it to the right prospect. But even now that you are able to do some nice personalized sequences, get a little bit more creative. And again, you mentioned like the two levels of personalization, technically three. It's like account level, industry level, and personal level. It really, like the way you present it, you might come off as a creep. Like, hey, I've seen that you've taken this specific action, so I'm reaching out. Like in most of the cases, you don't even have to mention it. If that specific action indicates a good intent, just reach out with something relevant to them and don't even mention it. It's like no need to tell them how you find them. It does get a bit creepy. And if we look up back to the personalization on the personal level, again, you might get replies because you're saying something that's a bit personal to them. But do they actually have the intent? Do they actually have the problem? Are you just getting replies, or are you trying to get to a sale? So definitely personalization on account level and industry level is a lot better. But then you also have to consider the timing. And instead of blasting emails, reaching out to that portion of your market that would potentially be good for them at that point and with something relevant.
You make a good point. To be honest, that's a whole other webinar, like our B2B, for example. Taking that information and instead of saying, "Hey, I saw you were on my website, let's chat."
Super creepy, man.
Yeah, what were you doing on the website, and kind of like maybe potentially reach out to them with some like context around that. For example, like you take pricing, for example. If they're looking on the pricing page, they might be further along, so therefore the message could be something that resonates with
exactly.
We are cheaper, or we are more affordable over the long run. Or I never really like to frame a message like that, so I need to think about that a bit more. Anyway, I reckon we could do a couple of these sessions, but for this one, I've given Panos here 5 target accounts that would be a good fit for mixed reality rooms. So mixed reality rooms is one of the products we've got at ABM Answered, where we basically build video games around marketers' content in a B2B sense. So you could Vodafone, one of our clients, they would give us a presentation and we would turn that into a video game experience where they can reach out to their target accounts. It's really good for customer expansion and partner expansion. Now, we have, I wouldn't go into the lead scoring. In fact, let's just get into the execution stage. But Panos, I don't know if you want to kind of prelude this or anything, or if you want to dive straight in. But ultimately, it would be great on the session for you to show us how you would leverage Clay to help a company like Mixed Reality Rooms break into these 5 top target accounts.
Well, absolutely. And if you want to cut me off at any point, feel free. I'm going to dive straight into it. But if there's anything like, nice, okay, let's do it. I'm going to share my screen. I cannot hear your sound.
Oh, well, that's so ironic. I said I should probably buy a microphone because I'm getting a bit of echo. Okay, are you having trouble screen sharing?
No, it's all good.
Okay. Okay, we're good. Okay, you might need to zoom in again for my all people's eyes. So little command plus. Awesome.
So we're currently at 100%.
So there are my target
these were 5 target accounts and pretty large, right? Excluding Rico, the rest are like insanely large. And when you're reaching at this level of companies, especially if you want to find decision makers, it's basically easy to find. So as you said, with Apollo, Sales Navigator, now Clay, different other data sources, it's quite easy to map out the organizational chart of the company. But reaching out to the decision makers directly, you are setting up yourself for failure unless you have like the hottest offer in the market or some kind of name in the market. So what we've done here is that we started with these 5 companies, and we typically do this through Sales Navigator. It has the most up-to-date data, at least on a prospect level. And we search for a few job titles, seniority and silo, to build up a prospect list on those 5 accounts. So here you can see like 340 about people that we pulled from Sales Navigator based on different job titles like CMOs, marketing, but director, head and above, event manager, partnerships, and so on. From this point on, we want to classify them in 3 different tiers. And the strategy that we will take for the company is basically tier 3 is like manager level, tier 2 is director to VP, and tier 1 it's the C-level executives. And by classifying them in 3 different tiers, we can set different campaigns with the objective to climb up the ladder progressively. So we can definitely personalize on the contact level or on the account level or even on the industry level. And I do have a few points here. Let's say that you can do personalization either on the account level, so event date, for example, or macro level, which is industry trends. But it's a lot better to be fully relevant to the problems that they're actually experiencing. So by doing this tiering here, we have these three segments. Tier 1, about 22 contacts. Tier 2, about 110, and it's mainly directors and VPs. And tier 3, which is the lower tier, about 200 contacts. And we can associate each of the tiers with the tier above them. So let's say Lee here, for example, is the region manager strategic accounts. Their direct contact above them is going to be Jason, which is the international accounts director. So when we reach out to Lee, we can say something like, I want to reach out to Jason, but before I take this to him, I wanted to get your feedback first. And you can basically go with the objective to collect information from these accounts. And typically managers are a lot more eager to respond. You can go with the objective to collect information on this level. And then once you have enough findings, then you can go to Jason, and you know who's above Jason. It's Sachin, like the CMO. And here you mentioned something super relevant because you've already spoken with a few colleagues of Jason. And before you take this to Sachin, you're hoping to get like his inputs as well. So you do this and you progressively climb the ladder with information that's coming out directly from the company instead of going after Sachin directly, which is the CMO.
So this is really interesting. And for those that don't know how to use Clay, maybe we can, and we don't need to go fully into it, but maybe you can open up the prompt and see how. So all of this is ultimately automated. So there are still people out there that build all of these lists manually. And to be fair, this is built manually using kind of like sales nav and like identifying the people. But can you open up the prompt there, Panos, for like the tier 1, tier 2, and see to kind of show people how
Yeah,
it all
absolutely. Okay, so I mean, some things are bound to be manual unless you're setting evergreen campaigns.
Yeah.
So let's say we source the list initially with all the contacts. Clay's really good, even on the basic level, like the free features. Formulas, by far the best, love it. And what you can do is like JavaScript with AI. So what you can do here is to basically, I've asked it to classify on 3 tiers based on job title that I pulled. And this is on a basic level. You can go like really deep into it and have inclusions and exclusions. This is just to showcase what's possible, but this costs nothing. It's a direct feature from Clay. And based on the job title, you classify them into these 3 different tiers.
When I got my head around, when I first like saw this and then finally got my head around it, because like even looking at it now, it's not like the most comfortable on the eyes. Like you've got the code at the bottom there, and then you've got like a lot of variables going on. It kind of blew my mind because you're ultimately doing all the prep work ready for multi-threading from the offset. Now, when it comes to the message, right? So the message, so we're going to work from the bottom and go up and build relevance. What sort of message do you go in with typically? Have you got any kind of like examples? For example, would you go in industry? Would you go in accounts? What's the first type of message that you go into for those tier 3 prospects?
If I go in tier 3, the core level of the messaging is that I want their feedback on what I'm doing, basically. Plus, it's the multi-threading personalization that you are mentioning, that direct senior. But it really, after that point, it really depends what I'm selling. So if I'm selling like a recruitment platform, for example, I can definitely look into a signal if they're hiring for any specific role or how many jobs they have active, and mention that in my message or lean into that direction instead of mentioning it directly.
Yeah, so this is hopefully this kind of gives the viewers more of an indication of how Clay and tools similar to it are more tailored towards ABM as opposed to the old traditional spray and pray kind of Apollo. What would you say are the main differences between running your, because Apollo have started to bring in like enrichment features into their platform if you set up sequences that way.
Yeah.
What would you say the main advantages are if you can get your head around Clay to using Clay as opposed to Apollo?
Okay, so first of all, you have a lot more enrichments. So Clay is basically like a massive data aggregator across different platforms. Plus, the usage of AI and prompting. For example, here on industry trends, we do have, okay, this is a basic prompt. This is a bit more advanced. But once you get that information, you can also use OpenAI integrated with Clay to craft personalized sequences, or Twine AI is quite good to do that. With Apollo, I think that the main disadvantage that you have is how easy it is to exclude prospects from the campaign, because you get a lot of noise.
Yeah.
Like Sales Navigator, Apollo, the more standard data sources, you get a lot of noise. And with Clay, it's a lot easier to clean up that noise, because even you can actually do this for free. I typically use formulas to do this. And I can check, for example, and say quite quickly, check the box if job title contains any of the below. So I can mention different, what is the cursor? Okay, so let's do this live. Okay, so let's say I want to exclude any juniors from my campaign because there's an avoidable noise when I source the list from Apollo or Sales Navigators. I can easily say here, check the box if job title contains below and start listing some keywords: chief, director, P. Let's say I want managers as well. Like this is like a super spreadsheet. So, okay. And what I can do next is not checked, and I instantly have a list of people that, at least on seniority level, it's not where I want them. So if that's part of my noise, the initial list that I did, I can easily clean it up, like either delete them, exclude them, or push them into a different campaign. I can also classify quite easier with Clay because I do have these capabilities, and anything that has to do with formulas is basically free. I can also, like here, I only classified in tiers. I can also classify by silos. I can say, for example, same logic, but this time I want to look into, I think the zoom in is messing up the functionalities. Okay, but this time I want to look into, let's say, marketing or commercial. And in this case, I have a true false function, but I can use a similar formulas like I did with tiers and say, if it's marketing, commercial, growth, whatever, classify them as marketing. If it's sales, partnerships, accounts, classify them as sales. If it's founder or co-founder, classify them as founding team. So I can also do multiple segmentations based on seniority, silos, and different other data points, which I don't really have the capacity to do it with Apollo. The key differences, a lot more data points that I can pull from different sources. It's a much better data aggregator. Insane capabilities with formulas that you can do. And this is how I did with the tiers. You can associate each table with each other. So in this case, for example, I had a lookup function to find the contacts from tier 2 based on a similarity on the company URL, because everyone has the same company URL. And I have all the data here, and I can pull it into this table. So if I want to do any multi-threading technique, I can do it like this.
Oh, I was on mute. This is like, yeah, you are far more advanced at this than me, Panos. That's for sure. So
I
this
have to
kind of,
test you.
this is nailing like the first problem that we spoke about right at the start, right? Which is targeting the right people
Yep.
at the right time, almost with the right message, right? So a lot of people, like we said earlier, a lot of people, and like you said, a lot of people think targeting is about finding the right person, but sometimes you just can't find the right person. And the best approach is actually to take away, which is exclude people that aren't the right people, and try and get
Yep.
that as small as possible. And I always have backup lists as well, right? So if the people I do reach out to don't respond, I've got another segment that I can release. So I think that really helps on the targeting side. When it comes to the second part, the relevance, we have kind of touched upon it here, and multi-threading in with their line managers, and you've got the three tiers as you mentioned. You've got the industry, the account, and the prospect level insights. One of the biggest problems that I know ABMers have, especially at larger companies, is data like validity and data reliability. And even at startups for that matter, like Apollo, no disrespect, an amazing tool. They've made me lots of money in the past. But like the data is garbage because, like you said, SalesNav updates a lot quicker than Apollo
Yep.
does, or they want to charge you more for more verification features. So that's led me to buying tools like Find Email to kind of like qualify the data. Now, what did Clay do on well, how is Clay's data a starting point, as in like finding email addresses? If you do use Clay to find email addresses, and how is it in terms of like industry insights? Like, I don't know personally, I don't know. So if you don't know, then that's fine as well. Like how it pulls in kind of the insights at account level or at prospect level. And like, for example, at prospect level, is it just is it like that pig farm stuff we were talking about? Is it just the weird, creepy stuff, or like how does it kind of pull in that sort of information? If you've got an answer to that.
It depends. Okay, so the first thing to keep in mind is that Clay doesn't, I mean, it does have a few, but most of Clay's data sources are not native. They aggregate data sources. So the accuracy, it's as good as the accuracy of those data sources. There are a few that are quite accurate, but in most cases, you might miss like a few points. So it really depends on the approach that you want to take. For example, you can find the recent posts of a prospect based on different keywords and do a personalized line based on that if they do have a post that's relevant to you. This is quite accurate. Some more native enrichments that Clay has is basically you can, let's say if I have the LinkedIn profile of the prospect, I can do an enrichment to get some additional data points, and this is fully accurate because it's directly from LinkedIn. I get like a list of different data points that I can pull and use, which is essentially anything that the prospect has on their LinkedIn profile. This is 100% accurate because they pull it directly from LinkedIn. So let me actually do this so you can see how it looks like. But this at the same time costs Clay credit. So it it really depends on how you use it. And one of the good things with Clay is that you can experiment with different data sources without subscribing to those directly. It does cost more, but technically you can trial it. So let's say, for example, I want to try based on technology stack. Instead of going with build with, which I think it's like 250 per month the subscription, I can use from Clay, and it's gonna cost me. Sorry, I misclicked. It's gonna cost me 2 credits per row. So if I want to experiment with this just to test out a campaign and see the results, this is definitely handy because I don't have to pay 250. But if I want to scale this, I do need to go with build with and connect my API to Clay. So this is another good thing with Clay. Again, the accuracy on this is gonna be as accurate as built with is.
Yeah. And I think for the people that, if they are going to try this themselves with Clay, and I had to in the start, like Clay can be really expensive. And well, the same with any AI tool. There are like developers, for example, that wake up the next morning. We got stung by a little cost recently. Or well, I think Charlie saved it, but it's like he left the AI to run in the background and he didn't put any limits on it. And I think what like anyone starting with Clay should do exactly kind of what you suggested, which is like pull 10 rows. I think it even suggests to do 10 rows at a time, doesn't it? As opposed to running for the whole
Yeah.
map. Yeah. And it's the
I
same.
saw something, it was from another Clay expert, I forget his name, but I saw it on his LinkedIn, it was quite nice. It was basically randomized based on the columns. So if you want to do some random enrichments to test it out, go completely random. And you can do this with formulas. It's like, let's say I have 110 leads here. I can use like a formula and say, it's to refresh this. Again, the zoom in the screen messes up with the functions.
Oh, apologies, that's my fault.
No worries. I might to zoom out a bit, but
My
yeah.
old man eyes.
Okay, so I can say assign a random number from. Okay, so let's say I want to randomly enrich 10 leads here. I'm gonna say from 1 to 11. Okay, this is gonna be basic. If LinkedIn is not empty, this is gonna randomize kind of a pool. So if I want to test an unbiased pool of data and say, okay, show me anything that's to 1, for example. Okay, now I can randomize this and enrich it to see like the results.
I see. Okay. Okay. Why would you use that, Panos?
Because if you want to enrich a specific pool, a small pool of prospects to check the validity, typically when you start with different data sources, the best ones are on top.
I
You're
see.
not really checking the validity. Yeah. You're not really checking the validity. I mean, you are, but you're checking like the premium prospects. If you do this, you go a bit more randomized checks.
Yeah, that's very smart. I like that. I find that as well. Yeah, and you see that in Apollo, like it tails off like, hey, you can access all these emails first, and then you get to page like 6, and the next page is from 6 to 15. It's like email unavailable or email unsure.
Yeah,
So that
this is
makes a lot of
another good point. This is another good point, and this is also handy. So again, because Clay is like a data aggregator, let's say you want to find a work email, you can basically do a waterfall enrichment based on different providers, and you can either be subscribed to a few of them or not at all. I typically prefer to be like two. I really like ICPs and Lead Magic. So you can have like a list of providers here, and if provider A doesn't find it, it's going to go to B, to C, to D, and so on. And there's a validation tool here as well. Again, when it comes to emails, it's not a native to Clay. They just aggregate it. And one point here, like full enrich, it's also quite nice. And full enrich, it's like they have like a built-in waterfall as well. So, but it's a bit more expensive. So what I'm gonna do here is like I typically use ICPs and Lead Magic as the first two. The rest I just spend the Clay credits. And if I'm not able to find it, I'm also gonna use full enrich as an additional column, but only execute it on those that I was not able to find it. In order for me to do that, and this is again a very nice feature of Clay, I can set conditional runs. So let's do it live as an example. I can set conditional runs basically and only run this column if a specific set of criteria is met. So let's say I do this one first and I want to only find emails of people that have a LinkedIn description in case I want to summarize something and use it in my email. I don't have the description here, but here, let's say job title contains director, for example. You can go like as freely as you want here. So this is your waterfall. It's like you have step 1, step 2, step 3, and it's going to go in sequence.
until it finds one. Yeah. Good old find email coming through for us. We love that. Shout out
Yeah,
to Valentine.
it's a pretty solid.
It
But
is.
again, you mentioned about the validity of the providers, and this is like an ever-changing landscape. So lately, I use Instantly's verification tool to verify my emails because they've released a feature that the verification goes through their entire database and email transactions. And if the email is valid, they're going to measure it as valid. Because they do have that capacity to do it, it's a lot more accurate than anything else. And I've seen that a lot of emails that, I mean, not a lot, but there's like a small rate, but few emails that were counted as valid from other providers, they are counted as invalid from other providers. Lately, I trust Instantly more when it comes to validation. So this is like also something to keep in mind. This is like an ever-changing landscape, and finding rates might drop from email provider A, validation rates might drop from email provider B. So it's good to be on top of it. But the more you experiment with this, the more you know.
So is that okay? So that's the benefit of the waterfall, right? It's like one provider might pick up one thing, another might not. So by running the waterfall, you're almost spreading the risk, right? But like, it's instantly verification not fit into Clay.
No, they do have it here. It's like you can verify the emails. You just need that API key. Typically, okay, when it comes to being smart with Clay credits, there are a few cases that make sense to use them. In other cases, it doesn't. It really doesn't. Like when it comes to finding emails and verifying emails, always subscribe to your ideal providers because it's a lot cheaper. Because if I want to verify here like 350 emails, it's going to cost me one per row. It's going to be 350 Clay credits. If that's, let's say, 5,000, it's going to be 5,000 Clay credits, which is about how much? Like 200 USD. If I go with a verifier, it's going to be like $30. So it's the difference is huge. So you really need to be smart with what providers you want to integrate with Clay and what you leave to Clay as is.
It's honestly, it scares me how expensive. Like everything in the world seems to be getting cheaper. It's like you can make software products without developers now. You can make websites on your own. But email seems to be the only thing that's getting like more expensive with with scale, because you now need all of these tools. You can't just have like an Apollo anymore. You need some of this. Panos, this has been really really interesting, and I'm sure I'm going to have many follow on questions and challenges, not just in my head that I kind of want answers to, but from the community. What would you say is the biggest? We'll end on this. Like, if someone is experimenting with clay or wants to experiment with clay, what is typically the biggest beginner's mistake? Like, where do people go wrong?
Nice question. I think I'm not sure if I would call it a mistake. I think the biggest blocker when people start experimenting with clay is that now it's at a point that it feels like a mountain, but once you start with it, it's quite easier than it looks. And one of the best ways to start, in my opinion, because clay has a lot of resources available. I'm not going to say like the academy because, okay, it's definitely nice to do. The best way to start, in my opinion, is to find templates from clay because they have pre-built templates on their website and reverse engineer them. And once you get an understanding on how each component works and why it's set up like this, because all the templates are set up by experts and there's an approval process from Clay to be featured on the website. Once you get an understanding as to why each of the columns is set up like this, it really helps with understanding all the components behind it.
I love that. You've ended on a positive. That is, if you can get over the initial obstacle, which actually you're right, it's not a mistake. It's like an obstacle, a challenge. It gets easier. That's super. Right.
Again, to be honest, it's not hard. It's quite easy to do. It's like if you have a creative brain and an analytical brain, you're gonna love it. If you only have an analytical brain, you're gonna love it, but you might need to have a direction on the use cases. So
And
it really
if
depends.
you don't want to do it anyway, go to Panos and relevance, because
That's also
clearly
good.
I think it's a testament to you as well. Like, the fact that you can do this live is often how you can call people out. Like, I don't think I could do it live. I understand clay. I've played around it, but like the fact that you can just like switch. Here's this example. Here's this example. Here's this example. I think that shows why you are one of the top clay experts around.
And I appreciate it. And there are always levels, right? It's I can definitely get better too.
Wow, can't we all? Can't we all? Panos, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me, Sam. I'd love to come back again. ABM is like a huge topic.
For sure. We're going to get you on. Right, I'm going to
Okay,
end it
try this out for the
here.
mixed reality rooms, by the way.
No,
Got
no, no. All right,
low
we're
for
never going to end
feedback.
it.
Nice.